So the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin. It says Putin is committing war crimes in Ukraine. Fair enough. But what about the war crimes committed by Western countries over the years? Silence from the ICC on that front. Well, now the ICC has the opportunity to redeem itself. I'm sure you remember the war against ISIS, the one in which thousands of innocent civilians were killed. As it turns out, the United Kingdom killed many of those civilians. And the worst part is this: it denies all of them. It says it conducted precision strikes. Evidence shows they were way off the mark. Here's how London's lies have been exposed.
By 2015, a terror group called the Islamic State had become too big a threat to ignore. So the US launched Operation Inherent Resolve against ISIS. 30 countries were part of it, but the US and the UK led the charge. In less than a year, the world saw the Islamic State fall apart. It was a big victory. The US admitted that its campaign killed civilians too. The UK did not. It claimed to have fought a perfect war against ISIS, one in which no civilians were killed, at least by British forces. Now, an investigation by The Guardian and global war crime watchdog Air Wars has indicted Britain. The battle for Mosul was the hardest one fought after World War II. The Iraqi city was reduced to rubble. 11,000 civilians were killed in Mosul alone, both by ISIS and the Western-led coalition. Now, an investigation has identified at least 6 airstrikes in which several civilians were killed. And which country's missiles killed them? The United Kingdom's. A total of 43 British airstrikes are said to have caused civilian casualties. To say that these strikes merely killed civilians would not cover it. They destroyed entire families and ruined many lives. Lives of people like Imam Yunus, who was 31 at the time. She lost both her legs and her eldest daughter, who was just 6 years old then. Her 3-year-old daughter survived, but fragments of the missile tore into her stomach, and they're still in her skull. Yunus's son was a toddler when the missile struck. He lost part of his foot and hand. Yunus has not returned to Mosul since. She says, and I quote, "It's still impossible for me to think about going back to Mosul now. I didn't even visit my daughter's grave. I can't do it." But Britain remains defiant. It insists it did not kill any civilians. In response to the investigation, the UK's Ministry of Defence said, and I quote, "There is no evidence or indication that civilian casualties were caused by strikes in Syria and Iraq." British forces started bombing Iraq in 2014. A year later, they started pounding Syria. Between 2014 and 2020, the UK dropped 4,000 munitions on both countries. It claims these bombings killed over 3,000 terrorists, but not even one civilian. So either the UK has some military superpowers that make civilian casualties impossible, or it has been lying to the world. The latest investigation says London lied. The US, meanwhile, has said that the coalition bombings killed about 1,400 civilians, but it refused to identify the countries responsible for these deaths. By March 2019, the US, UK, and their allies had conducted close to 35,000 strikes over Syria, Iraq, and Libya. Will the International Criminal Court take this up? Forget prosecuting those responsible for civilian deaths, it is not even trying to confirm how many died. The worst part is this: the victims of British strikes cannot claim compensation. Even if London takes responsibility for civilian deaths, the victims won't get compensated. They passed a law in 2021 to ensure this. The law sets a 6-year limit on claims for damages. And that time period has lapsed for the victims of Operation Inherent Resolve. So, the onus is now on the International Criminal Court. But don't hold your breath for it to swing into action.
The ICC will issue arrest warrants for activities to protect children who have lost their parents from combat zones in Iraq and Syria to a place of safety. According to United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, as of December 2022, in northeastern Syria. 2022, despite a 60% increase in repatriations. It reported that approximately 7,000 children are trapped in unsafe camps. Arab media reported that the repatriation of more than 200 Russian children is worth mentioning. Children of foreign nationals affected by ISIS. But other countries have not yet decided to repatriate their own citizens, the report says. In the UK, its own media is investigating its own war crimes and suing the country. If that UK announces that it will supply depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine. In Japan, politicians and intellectuals will say through the media that DU is a conventional weapon. As I have told you before. This is like exposing their hypocrisy regarding humanity and human rights to the world. I will tell you about the supply of depleted uranium munitions another time.